Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lizzie Wagner. I'm the Senior Challenge Events Manager at RNIB, and I'm joined by Catherine Hughes, our Senior Social Media Manager at RNIB as well. Today we're going to be talking about approaches to digital fundraising. So if we move on to our first slide, please, Catherine. So random, wet, love is all around single cover on screen here. Just because to start with, kind of digital is all around us. And that led me to think of that famous song by Wet, Wet, Wet. You know, just because we don't have digital in our job titles doesn't mean that we shouldn't all be thinking about digital all the time. Because it's now just so fundamental to how we all live our lives. Catherine and I are going to be talking from two different perspectives. So in terms of how we approach digital, so obviously Catherine from a social media perspective and me from fundraising kind of challenge events. In terms of challenge events fundraising, so the area that I look after at RNIB, digital encompasses kind of everything we do to raise money. So in terms of how we recruit people, digital marketing as our key channel. In terms of how we sign people up, our sign-up journeys are online. How we steward people, the main channel that we use for that is email. In terms of where the money comes from, the majority of our fundraising is raised via online fundraising. And those, fundraising pages shared predominantly on social media. And then also in terms of how we kind of celebrate the stories of participants, largely through kind of online media coverage and social media. So there's lots of areas that I could have picked to talk about. But today I'm kind of going to be focusing on virtual challenge events, which is obviously very kind of like popular right now. And because I can share some learnings on kind of what we've done recently at RNIB, but also talk about kind of digital marketing and also our kind of sign up journeys for these digital products that hopefully we'll share some learnings with you. So moving on to the next slide. So in terms of the virtual challenge events market at the moment, so just wanted to share kind of a picture of what the landscape looks like. So in 2015, there was £1 million raised on Just Giving via virtual fundraising events. And in 2019, so last year, there was 12 million raised. So far to date in 2020, over 50 million has been raised through virtual events. So it was already a growing market, but obviously the pandemic has exploded that, as we all know. Which has obviously increased kind of opportunity, but it's also increased the competition. Interestingly, there's a big piece of research that's just come out, that only 16% of the virtual events that have taken place since April this year were already planned. So half of them were launched in response to the pandemic, and then around about 40% of them were kind of physical events that pivoted into virtual digital events. So there is a lot more competition than there would have been. And that 82% of all the new virtual events since April have involved a physical activity. There's some good fundraising coming out of virtual events. It's not as high as kind of physical challenge fundraising events, but at the moment the average is around about £200 per person. It does vary in terms of different types of activity, but £200 is around about the average. And then another kind of really important indicator within this area and the opportunity is how much kind of online fitness has hugely grown. So a huge increase in the Couch to 5K app, so the NHS Couch to 5K app. So they had nearly 100% increase in downloads, and over nearly 900,000 new users between March and June. Another interesting stat is that on Just Giving, over 50,000 Just Giving pages have been linked to Strava since April. So Strava is kind of the market leading fitness activity tracking app. And the staggering stat that over 40 million YouTube video fitness hits in April alone. So again, just some of these kind of insights I picked out to show kind of, how much this area has grown and how much kind of opportunity there is. Then moving on to the next slide. So in terms of virtual challenge events and who's doing it well, so we've spent quite a lot of time looking out into the sector. One really great example is the British Red Cross Miles for Refugees. So on the screen is one of their social media adverts. So it says Miles for Refugees, I'm making my miles count this September. And then there's just a very simple image of a pair of legs. It's either a power walk or a run, I'm not exactly sure. But this event launched a few years ago. They raised £27,000 in the first year. In year 3, they'd got it up to a brilliant £285,000. And in year 4, which was this year, they've raised £2 million with over 7,000 people signing up. So, just shows like how much the context of this year has kind of contributed to the growth of these virtual challenge events and the opportunities that are out there. A reason why it's such a great example, not only in terms of like its kind of growth, but that how it directly links to the mission. So basically, with Miles for Refugees, fundraisers pick a distance to walk, run, cycle, or swim over a month. And the distance that they cover, there are different distances that they can cover, which represent part of the journey a refugee would make to reach safety. So it's got a real great direct link to the charity mission. It also gives people lots of options, so it attracts kind of different abilities. And it's, it's simple marketing, simple adverts that they produce, like the example on screen, that don't, it's easy to get an image of some legs or someone running and create something from that. And the other thing is they've really reached their kind of warm supporters with this event. So in terms of linking to the mission, but also they've managed to kind of recruit a lot of kind of colder health and fitness audiences as well. So moving, and I've just added, so also just to mention on that side, so they do the sign up via Just Giving. So you sign up for this event by setting up a Just Giving page. So you directly set up a fundraising page. And then I've just also added the URL on there for you to check out, because we'll share these slides afterwards. So moving on to the next slide. So we've got, so what we're doing at RNIB with virtual challenge events. So we launched our kind of virtual challenge event, Marathon Mates, this year. We were planning to run a virtual challenge event this year anyway, but the format of what we were going to do had to change quite significantly as a result of the pandemic and social distancing rules and lockdowns. So I suppose my point here is that we developed something really quite quickly. So we were planning March to June, came up with the idea, came up with some creative, and then got it out live for recruitment July to August, and the event took place in September. Marathon Mates is basically, it's a fairly simple idea that basically 2 people buddy up and complete a marathon distance over a month. Very much inspired by the relationship of VI runners and guide runners, and with kind of accessibility and inclusivity at the heart of it in terms of anybody can take part. On the screen, you can see one of our kind of social media adverts. Again, quite cheap and simple to produce. At the top, we've got introducing the OC, which is the team name. On one side, we've got a picture of a young woman, which is one of our staff members, her name and the distance she's going to be traveling and why she's taking part in the event. And then on the other side, a picture of her partner and why he's taking part. But literally, this is, we asked some staff members to take some pictures and created this kind of advert. In the first year, we had 230 people take part, and we've raised £38,000. So we're pretty pleased with that in kind of year 1. Average raise per person was around about £165. And the other thing, we had really good media reach with this event, and this is obviously one of the great opportunities with these types of events. We had a lot of people who are blind and partially that sighted themselves taking part, and therefore we were able to tell the story of their sight loss journey through their participation in the event. So that's where we kind of got that really good kind of media reach, and largely through kind of regional online press coverage. And then I've just included the URL so you can check out our website after. So moving on to the next slide, please, Catherine. I'm sorry, I'm firing through these. So I just wanted to chat through some of the kind of key digital marketing channels and tools that we use for the event. So obviously we have a website and a landing page, and that is your shop front. We want to make the content on there as engaging as possible to keep people browsing as long as they can, and then ultimately convince them to get involved. There's basic stuff in there in terms of making sure your sign up buttons are clear and obvious. But also a key thing that we've done is kind of making sure that there's real supporter stories on there as much as possible. And that's the content that we tend to find that people do really engage with on the website. Next is Facebook. It is always our most successful digital marketing channel, Facebook marketing. For this event, we did our standard process of kind of identifying our key target audiences, For example, we have an audience of people particularly interested in sight loss, or we have health and fitness audiences. So we might target people who, you know, like Couch to 5K or Park Run on Facebook. We do a lot of testing of different copy and calls to actions to see which works best. And it's the same with kind of images and videos. So, you know, we put out a number of different types of images and videos and different types of calls to copy and see what works, scrap the stuff that doesn't, and put more money into the stuff that is working. What we did find in terms of Facebook content on this event was the most successful videos and images were the cheapest ones to produce. And it was the ones where we asked staff to kind of either do a selfie of them in their running gear or a little video of them running down the street. And that was the stuff that performed most successfully, both in terms of driving traffic to the website, but also in terms of actually converting people to sign up. Next is search. So just talking about search marketing basically, and making sure that you've got kind of Google AdWords running. You know, what we tend to do for each project is we'll identify a list of keywords, so key search terms and keywords that people would search for when going onto Google. So for a virtual challenge event, you know, things like virtual running event or running or virtual challenge, they'd be kind of keywords and terms that we would kind of have AdWords running against. And then also making sure that those AdWords marry up with the copy on our web page as well. So that also helps you kind of optimize your kind of digital performance, making sure that, so on our web page, we included things like the words running and virtual challenge and virtual running. And lastly, just to mention on that, if you're not already, kind of make the most of the Google grant for AdWords. So basically Google offer a free grant for non-profits to run AdWords activities. There's a link at the end of this presentation to go and look at that if you're not already making the most of it. We do use that and we find some really good results from it. Moving on to display. So it's the first time we've actually done some display marketing with our challenge events fundraising this year, and we tested with small budgets. And it's basically, I'm sure, you know, you're aware, but where you have kind of adverts running on other websites. So you might have an advert running at the top or along the side of a web page. And we were targeting people who are visiting health and fitness sites, because obviously that links to the event. But like I say, it was the first time we did it, and it was actually our third most successful traffic driver to the website. And people who were going to the website from that activity were spending quite a bit of time on the page as well and engaging with the content. So that's definitely worth kind of looking into. Next is email. So email marketing is a key kind of digital channel for us. On this event, we didn't do a huge amount, but we did a series of emails to past supporters over the last 3 years who we obviously had consent to contact. And the activity drove quite good traffic to the website, but it only resulted in a very small number of direct conversions. So it wasn't really a hugely successful channel for us. So obviously we would need to go and look at the performance of those emails, but also it's just being mindful of it's quite labor intensive to deliver those email marketing campaigns, you know, selecting the data and writing the emails, building the emails. So, you know, again, it's kind of thinking about energy versus what you get out of it. And then final 2 points are just Google Analytics and Facebook Analytics. So this is like absolutely key. I mean, as I said at the start, you know, I don't necessarily have digital in my job title, and neither does anyone in my team, but digital is critical to everything that we do. And one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is really upskill ourselves in terms of understanding how Google Analytics works and Facebook Analytics work. There's lots of free tools out there. And again, there's links at the end of the presentation to kind of upskill. But, you know, we look at this every day to understand how our web pages are performing and how, you know, and Catherine will look at it in terms of how social media activity is performing, you know, understanding how many people are visiting, what marketing channels people are coming from onto the website, how much time people are spending on the page. So they're like really critical things, I think, to include in your kind of like regular kind of review and reporting of projects. And it means you can be making kind of live changes. You can see stuff that's working and focus more energy on that, and see stuff that isn't and stop, you know, kind of scrap that activity. So moving on to the next slide. So kind of key takeaways, I suppose, from the virtual challenge events and kind of digital work that we've done with virtual challenge events this year. I think the first one is think really carefully about your sign up process. So, you know, obviously kind of, and this just doesn't just apply to signing people up to virtual challenge events. This applies to, you know, somebody completing an online donation form, or signing up for a community fundraising product online. The kind of same principles apply. Just making sure that it is as simple as possible for people to sign up. With event sign up, it gets a bit more complicated than just giving a donation, because sometimes, you know, we need to collect other information. With Marathon Mates this year, what we did for the first time is we actually tested signing people up directly via Just Giving. So instead of completing a sign up form and then setting up a fundraising page, we combined those, and by setting up a Just Giving page, they were also signing up for the event. And the aim of us doing that was to try and reduce the number of steps that people needed to take in order to sign up. There were some issues with that, because obviously the final sign up was done on a third party on Just Giving. We couldn't track all of our analytics to the final kind of sign up point. And also only the details that Just Giving collected were the ones that we could collect. So, you know, usually, for example, we would ask for people's phone numbers, but Just Giving don't ask for that information, or we would ask for people's preferred reading format, and again, Just Giving doesn't ask for that. So so there were some kind of like pitfalls to doing that sign up process, and actually we did still find that our conversion rate, so the number of people, we had high traffic to the website, but the number of people who actually converted to sign up was quite low. So we're going to test for next year a different process for signing people up, because I think that is was potentially one of the key you know, areas that we need to improve, really. So next year what we'll be doing is just testing a kind of standard donation form to sign people up, and then signposting them to set up a fundraising page afterwards. Then in terms of other kind of key takeaways, you know, imagery can be really simple. So, you know, you don't need, like, you know, to spend lots of money on your digital marketing content. You know, for example, on Marathon Mates, if you go to the website, our main image is 2 pairs of trainers sitting side by side. Or we used quite a lot of stock images of people taking selfies. And then, for example, with, you know, Miles Refugees, they just use a pair of legs running, or someone on a bike. So it doesn't need to be kind of really fancy in terms of imagery, and it can be fairly simple. But then moving on from that, and the third point here is gather supporter generated images and videos. So from the moment that we started signing people up, we were asking them if they would share, you know, if they'd be up for sharing images of them in their running gear and doing little videos for us, and if they were happy to use them in our marketing campaigns. And then what we were doing is we were updating the website with that imagery, and updating our social media marketing with that content. And like I said earlier on, then that content went on to actually be some of our most successful social media marketing kind of adverts. Third on the checklist is fourth is use the good grant AdWords opportunity. So like I said, if you aren't using that, go and look into that, because it's free marketing basically, and we get some quite good results from that. There's only limited stuff that you can do with it, but it's still worthwhile. Number 5, kind of test small budgets on Facebook marketing. So that's what we tend to start off with, is we will have, like, as I mentioned, different images, different content, different copy, and we'll use kind of small test budgets to work out what works and what doesn't, and then invest more once we know what's working best. And then the final point is kind of, especially on virtual challenge events, that you don't need big budgets and lots of time. So, you know, we invested, you know, not a significant sum, but we did invest in Marathon Mates. We spent some money on it, but we are doing another virtual challenge in the new year, which we're doing on an absolute shoestring. You know, we're not, we're literally just going to get people to, you know, sign up and set up their fundraising pages. And I don't think it needs kind of, you know, it just needs an idea ask people to set up a Just Giving page and you're away. And I think lots of charities are doing this now. They're kind of using the current context as an opportunity to just put stuff out there, test it and see if it lands. So that would be my kind of final point, is just to give it a go, and that there aren't big budgets required to do that. So that's me. I've rattled through that. So sorry if the pace was a bit fast, and I'll hand over to Catherine to talk about social.
Thank you, Lizzie. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about fundraising through social media. And I just wanted to start with my absolute favourite stat, which is that the average person scrolls through 91 meters of content every day on their phone. And that is the height of Big Ben. So what we're going to be talking about today is really how can you stand out amongst that. So you're not just competing maybe with other charitable organisations, but friends and family, kind of news organisations, other brands, groups that people will be following or choose to be in. And how can you make your fundraising activity kind of stand out and get the attention that it needs and deserves within all that noise? So at RNIB, we use Facebook, including Facebook groups, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube primarily to help us meet our objectives, which naturally includes fundraising objectives. And interestingly, 9 in 10 people have used one or more of these social media platforms in the last 30 days in the UK. And social media is broadly used whatever your age, although different channels do tend to have a slightly different demographic on them. And so, as I said, we will use these channels to kind of reach our core audiences and meet RNIB's main objectives through both like proactive planned content, but also being reactive to what's in the news, what are people talking about, what are the latest trends and opportunities. Part of that work is kind of promoting and protecting our brand, also fundraising, campaigning, raising awareness, showing our impact, and really kind of developing people's relationship and affinity with us as an organisation. So there is a Venn diagram on the screen, and on the left it says what people want to hear from us, and on the right is what do we want to say, and then there's a small crossover in the middle. So in terms of what people want to hear from us, these are kinds of generalizations, but this is kind of what we work to for the most part. So the latest news linked to sight loss, people want opportunities to be heard and to share their experiences, and people really enjoy kind of inspiring or interesting stories. And we know this because we do really detailed analysis of what's performing well and what's not. We're always kind of evolving and developing that approach based on what's working or what's not working. So these things do change, but that's kind of a general overview. In terms of what we want people to hear, so as with any complex organisation, we have a lot going on at all times. We have to be quite disciplined about what we say and when we say it. So applying that insight I just mentioned about what our audience want from us, but also kind of weighing up the balance to ensure we're supporting RNIB's like wider organisational priorities through promoting like services, campaigns, fundraising activity, and brand building, but doing this in a way that's really engaging and compelling, and so we're not alienating our audience at all. And so the section in the middle, the crossover, that's kind of the sweet spot, and the challenge is trying to strike that balance between the two. We aim for around 20% of content really adding value, kind of not being selling, and the remaining 20% being more promotional. We don't always get this balance right, but it's something we're kind of working towards. And something that is really great for that is what Lizzie was just talking through around user-generated content. So those kind of informal videos and pictures can help show our impact, break down what we're doing, like why we're doing it, and really engage and get people to kind of commit and convert to our events, which is the main aim there. Okay, so I'm just going to talk now through a few kind of tips and tricks for what works on different channels. In general, kind of keeping your audience wanting more is always a great thing to aim for. So in terms of writing copy, still try to aim for 140 characters or less, ideally less. Like the shorter, the better in terms of social media. People's attention spans are so short now. And as we were saying with my Big Ben stat, you know, there's a lot of competition. So trying to stand out in a really crowded marketplace can be hard. And this is one thing you can do to really grab attention and stand out, be more shareable so you can reach new audiences, and all of these things will really help in terms of meeting fundraising goals. And the example on the screen is a video, and the caption says, "Today is White Cane Awareness Day. What does the white cane mean to you?" And this generated a really decent number of shares, comments, likes, and other engagements. Not a fundraising example, but just an example of kind of brevity in action. Next up is a little bit of a deep dive into Facebook. So Facebook is a very visual channel, and much like many of the other social media platforms. So images and video do tend to grab attention more than just a block of copy or a link. 95% of posts on Facebook are delivered or they're viewed by people on mobile devices or mobile phones. So making your images and videos portrait where you can, so they fill up the whole of someone's screen, is really ideal in terms of attention grabbing and stopping them scrolling past. Kind of focusing on community and connections is really important. And taking time to kind of think of your target audience. Who are they? What will they connect to? What will they relate to? And meeting people where they're at. And Facebook's fundraising tool is a really great example of this. So people really are still keen to set up birthday fundraisers for their special causes and things like that. So it's a really great opportunity there to encourage people to do that, but also once someone set one up, that kind of stewardship, thanking them, supporting them, seeing if they need anything, and celebrating them when they kind of hit their target. That is another free tool that can be used. I know people don't want to be told what to do. You've got to inspire them to want to do it. So thinking of different ways you can tell the same story, invest that time and energy into making your content as powerful as possible to really cut through the noise, and motivate people by using values that they can relate to. It's really important to just try and test different things, kind of break up the feed, keep it as fresh and as exciting as you can. So not being afraid to try new things, don't be afraid to fail, and see what works, because what might be great for our organisation might not work for someone else, and it's all about just testing and learning, and that is manageable in terms of being resource and time porting, and try to be as authentic as possible. If your audience don't trust you, they won't engage with you, so being really human-led, like person-centered, not too corporate, is always going to do much better than something that feels like a press release or like an official statement. And the example on the screen is a screenshot of a video of a lovely man called Barry, and he walked over 1,000 miles for RNIB over the summer and raised a huge amount of money. So he's one of our lovely challenge events participants, part of Team RNIB, and he sent in, one of his friends sent in this film, just filmed on a mobile, which it did really well, and that hasn't cost any time or any money to kind of put that together. So that's a really great opportunity of that user generated content that Lizzie was explaining earlier. And then just to talk a little about Facebook Live in particular. So Facebook Live broadcasts achieve 7 times the engagement rate compared to other content. So that makes them a really exciting opportunity to reach more people and kind of get more engagements, get more traffic to your website, get more conversions. They're really relaxed and informal, which is something that I love about them. When you go live on Facebook, it will send a push notification to all of your followers. So it's really great for grabbing attention in that way. Audiences are kind of more motivated to get involved. They know it's only going to be live for a certain amount of time. So that's really great for generating kind of comments and shares and things like that. And an account that has gone live on Facebook will see 3 times the number of engagements after they've gone live on that other post. So it kind of has this like long-term effect too. It's not just about the broadcast itself. And I think Facebook Live is a really great opportunity for fundraising. You can maybe use it to launch an appeal, to do a Q&A with an expert, and maybe that ends with a call to action to donate. You could host a fundraiser. And the example on the screen is a fundraiser that we did in the summer, which was a quiz for children. And you don't need much equipment at all, just someone who's confident, who can present, be your presenter, a fully charged mobile phone, and a decent internet connection. Ideally a quiet space, but you can make it work. If you had budget, you could get a tripod for around £15 off Amazon, but if not, you could keep the phone still, by balancing it, on some books or something like that, or just hold it selfie style. That is, it's completely fine too. And I'd say just a tip here would be to create a kind of hidden secret test page on Facebook. So you can go live on there before you actually go live on your main page. You can check, the sound, the visuals and everything's okay before the big broadcast. And actually in general, it's quite handy to have a test account. If you want to try something new, you can see how it's going to look and display in Facebook before you kind of publish it and, share it within your teams if you need to. And then Facebook groups. So there are 200 million people globally in what Facebook describes as a meaningful group. So a non-meaningful group would be something like a group that's set up to arrange a holiday or a stag do or something like that. So these are kind of active, so-called meaningful groups. RNIB, we have 14 of these. They're mostly focused on peer support and community connection, but we do have a small number that bring together our fundraisers and actually specifically our challenge events participants, like our London marathon runners, for example. And these are great because they provide a private space where supporters can share training advice, they can support each other, they can ask questions of RNIB, but also just kind of really develop that relationship that they have with us as an organisation, which in turn helps their fundraising and their kind of lifetime connection to us. They're also a great place to source that user-generated content that we were speaking at earlier. So it's that really engaging, authentic content, maybe someone sharing a photo they took on a training run. It doesn't take much time at all to sort that out, just sending someone a comment to say, we love this, can we share it on our Instagram, for example? And then you've got a great asset for marketing your fundraising events to a bigger audience. The example is from our team RNIB Facebook group. Okay, next up is Facebook algorithm, and there's a little gif of someone doing some really complicated algebra equation, which is the phase cycle when trying to suss out the Facebook algorithm, because they like to keep us on their toes, changing things all the time. And so the algorithm is basically the set of rules that Facebook will use to determine the ranking of a piece of content. Without an algorithm, Facebook wouldn't have any control. It would be a bit of a wild west out there. And it is a platform that was created to deliver meaningful engagements that connect people, not for organizations to kind of sell and promote themselves. So the algorithm will rank content and then decide how many people will see it. And then there's that kind of room for exponential growth within that based on whether people are interacting and engaging. So the first thing to think of in terms of kind of the algorithm is timing. So Facebook will serve your post to a small group within the first 30 minutes of going live. If it's doing well, it will open up to a much bigger audience. If it's not doing so well, it's not really getting much engagement, then it will kind of peak out there. And it can perpetually keep growing. So there's different things you can kind of do to work with this. And one thing we do at RNIB is we ask for our internal comms team and our internal comms network, which is called Workplace, we ask staff to share key posts. So that might be about fundraising, it could be another kind of announcement or launch, and I'll share the links there, and just our staff are happy to help like kind of get that engagement going, and so we can kind of grow that from there. Another important thing to do is to kind of post during peak times when you know people are online, so it will get seen, it will get interacted with, and there'll be that engagement. It really gives it the best shot possible. Now, this will be different for every organisation. RNIB, 5 PM on weekdays works best for us. But at my previous charity, it was 8 AM in the morning. I know Red Cross, who we spoke about earlier, say 11 AM in the morning for them works best. So that's all about like testing and learning, trying different things and comparing it. And we try to post just once a day, but post everything. And then the next tip is trying to make sure your content doesn't feel like advertising, because Facebook will restrict the reach there. So nothing too branded, nothing that feels really corporate, and trying to keep text on images to a minimum. Facebook say up to 20%, but they prefer images with no text on. Try to reduce outbound links. So Facebook want to keep users within their platform. They don't want you going off to like your own website or Guardian or wherever it might be. So being really mindful of that and only using outbound links when necessary, and the rest of the time keeping that engagement and activity within Facebook is the best thing to do. Encourage interaction, so maybe ask questions, ask people for their opinions on things. That can work really well. Try not to use the same phrases all the time, because Facebook will think you're spamming by being really repetitive. So that's like a really easy thing to avoid. And then there's also certain keywords which are best avoided too. So again, anything that feels like it's self-promotion or so shop, buy, things like that are worth avoiding. And that will really just help your content that you've worked so hard on to get served to the most people. And then that in turn means you can kind of meet your fundraising goals for that post. So next up is Twitter. On Twitter, we post more frequently than Facebook, so up to 8 times in a day. And Twitter is really great for sharing kind of news and reactions and updates. Make sure you're always adding something to the conversation, so you're saying something new or something interesting, and that way it'll be shareable and you can again reach new people, which is always important. Stats work really, really well on Twitter, and including links and hashtags can help with engagement there. There's a bit less of an emphasis on storytelling compared to Facebook and some of the other channels that we'll come to. The Twitter feed is less algorithm-led than Facebook. There is still an algorithm, but this means that timing is even more key. So again, making sure you think of those tests and working out what's best for you. It's also really great for amplifying other people. So if you have a fundraiser, maybe sharing what they've been working on, quote retweeting them, to celebrate them, to thank them, to encourage other people to get involved too, is a really easy and successful thing. The example on the screen is a campaigning one over from #day about using camel case, and it's just a video that reads aloud a hashtag that does not have camel case, so the letters are not capitalized, and just to show what that's like to a screen reader user, which was widely shared. And next up is hashtags actually. So that example on the screen is from Samaritan, and it says it's supposed to be #Blue Monday this Monday, but we're going to be copying the hashtags and turning it into #Blue Monday instead. Getting people together to connect over a warming cup. Will you be joining us this winter? And then there's a link to their fundraising campaign. So you can use hashtags in the way that they have to both tap into that wider conversation around Blue Monday, but also to give your fundraiser or your event, your activity, its own identity, and encourage that audience participation. I'd say avoid hashtags on Facebook. They're not really used in the same way, and it can just make copy harder to read. Make sure that they're relevant to the topic that you're talking about and not to you as a brand. Try to keep to 2 per tweet on Twitter, up to 30 on Instagram, but put them in the first comment, not in the post copy, because otherwise it can be really hard to read and really overwhelming. And yes, make sure you use camel case, so the first letter of every word is capitalized for accessibility. Next up is Instagram. So again, this is a really image-led platform. It's great for storytelling and building a community. It's quite challenging to link to drive traffic from Instagram because you can't put links and captions for Instagram grid posts. So instead, really focus on like building that community, showing your impact, thanking people for fundraising, and really showing like why they should choose you to fundraise for. Next up is IGTV, Instagram TV. So these videos are longer, up to an hour long, and portrait. If you post on IGTV, it will appear as a big icon in the Explore page. So again, reaching new people with your messaging. The example here is from Pancake Day. So 2 members of staff filmed themselves making pancakes using products from the RNIB shop, like the talking scales. And it's just a way of promoting what we have to sell and selling more products ultimately, but done in a way that's just a little bit more fresh and fun and entertaining. They're both real characters, so it's quite a fun one to watch. Excellent. Next up is Instagram story. So the images are just a screenshot of Instagram with an arrow pointing to stories, which appear as like a band at the top, lots of circles, and then a screenshot of an Instagram story in action, which is from Refinery 29, and it just says, I deleted all my apps for a week and it caused chaos. And yes, so stories are growing. They're massive already, 500 million daily users globally, and that's growing all the time. For stories, you can link outbound, but only if you have over 10,000 followers. So that's not ideal. But it's still a great place for sharing that kind of raw behind the scenes content, which is great for fundraising events, you know, when they can happen again offline, but also again good for sharing those kind of user generated pieces of content too. Unfortunately, on stories, you can't yet add alt text for image description, so including a voiceover for accessibility is key, or making video content audio-led. So LinkedIn. Now, 85% of page views on LinkedIn are now for content and not job ads anymore. So that's a huge shift in recent years. And LinkedIn's really great for sharing, again, stats, stories, and impact, so showing your value there. Hashtags and app mentions work well on LinkedIn, and they're really valued by the algorithm there. So it's worth including, like, researching some relevant hashtags to include. I'd say this is true of all channels, but using really clear calls to action, so view, watch, download, whatever you want people to do, is really great. And just remembering that kind of individuals talking to individuals is always going to be more authentic than your brand or your charity or organisation talking to an individual. And so, and actually we kind of know that the same piece of content shared by an employee versus the organisation that they work for will get 8 times the engagement. So it's really worth remembering to kind of use your trustees, your volunteers, your staff members, your community voices for that kind of advocacy work there. At RNIB, we aim for 2 posts a week on LinkedIn. The example is from Mind, who are doing really great work on LinkedIn. They're getting really outstanding engagement, especially compared to the number of followers that they have. It's being really widely shared. And the example is a graphic that says, paying attention to workplace mental health has never been more important. Mental health at work is here to help you find what you need. And then there's a logo and just a link out to the website where people can download those free resources from Mind. So it aims at employees. It's got that kind of professional angle. It's not the same kind of funny, relaxed environment that you might have, say, on Facebook, but it's still like a great place for raising awareness, talking about your fundraising events, things like corporate partnerships, obviously, like, naturally work really well on LinkedIn. And I know lots of smaller charities find LinkedIn a great place for reaching out to local businesses that they might want to partner with, maybe to sponsor an event, to, you know, donate raffle prizes and things like that. It can be really effective for making those kind of contacts too, especially when we're not able to kind of network in the same way during kind of the pandemic. And then finally, TikTok. So the example on the screen is Lucy Edwards, and she's standing with her guide dog in a train station, and I'm wearing a face mask, and the caption says, "How does a blind person know how to socially distance?" And that's just a screenshot of a video. I unfortunately can't play the whole video, but definitely worth a look at her TikTok in general. There's some really amazing content on there. So TikTok is really great for kind of creative content that's fun and different and very, very relaxed. Again, it's portrait videos, so taking up the full phone screen. We can add text and effects and music. Again, just bearing in mind general rules and best practice around accessibility there. It does have an algorithm, but it's driven by interest rather than who you choose to follow. So you'll be served with videos that have been selected for you. And it's actually very, very sophisticated algorithm there. Unlike anything I've seen on any other channel, and it learns so quickly too. It's very, very impressive, the technology behind that. So it's a really great place to, you know, potentially look at engaging a different, younger audience, also kind of entertaining and motivating people over like why they should fundraise or donate to your cause. Another great example to look at, again, is the Red Cross. They're doing some really interesting things with celebrity fundraisers like Lewis Capaldi. And then next up is paid social. So we've been talking about different organic social media channels so far, and that's kind of all about engagement and relationship building and making community online. Paid, on the other hand, is all about the conversions. And so, and by paid social, I mean advertising on social media. So it's great for reaching larger audiences, different audiences, and really highly targeted groups of people. At RNIB, we primarily use a strategy of prospecting followed by retargeting. So prospecting is what Lizzie was talking about earlier, so doing lots of small scale tests of different groups of people that you think will engage with your product. So that might be based on insight that you have, it might be a bit more anecdotal, just kind of that intuition. What do we think a kind of a customer of this event or this product looks like, and kind of going from there, what do we think their interests will be? Once you've kind of driven a decent amount of traffic to your web page through those prospecting ads, you then go to retargeting. Now, retargeting means you're serving the adverts just to people who have been on your web page in the past 28 days, but not converting, not taking the action that you wanted them to take. So you know they're interested, they're warm to you, but they haven't quite got over the line yet. So then you can kind of ramp up the urgency in your copy, like maybe change your creative to kind of to note with that in mind. And that's really our most successful strategy. And that is what the social media advertisers recommend in general. There's loads more you can read about that through online resources which are free from Facebook, for example. In general, we do find Facebook to be the most affordable platform, and money goes furthest. It's great for targeting, and it's just a really easy platform to manage in the back end too. And as Lizzie was saying, user-generated content is working better for us at the moment compared to more polished graphics, and photos are always better for us than text-based graphics if we don't have any video content. Again, short and sweet copy is always best. And you don't have to have a massive budget in any way. You could boost a post on your Facebook page to all of your followers for as little as £20. So picking like key moments when that's appropriate, and kind of maybe just testing and seeing if that helps you kind of convert more people. The screenshot is from our current Christmas stamps appeal, which is live at the moment, and it says, "Don't let your used stamps go to waste this Christmas," and there's a Christmas tree emoji. Save them from your cards and parcels and we'll recycle them into funds to create a future where sight loss is no longer a barrier. And the picture is just a pile of used stamps. That's the screenshot's got over 3,000 likes, 800 comments, 4,500 shares, and we know that that's resulted in almost 5,000 new customers for RNIB, these people but we weren't talking to before. So it's not just great for the stamps appeal, but kind of that long-term relationship we can have with people. And then finally, as Lizzie outlined earlier, these are just a few links to tools and resources which are all free and kind of easy to use. Headliner is a great one for editing videos, so subtitling them to make them accessible, for example. Canva for producing graphics, Facebook Blueprint and Google Garage are free courses which are run by the experts. I personally love Facebook groups for that kind of more anecdotal peer advice, like what people have tried, what's worked for them, what hasn't. So third sector comms and PR is a great one, and fundraising chat is another one. There's a general one for social media called the Social Media Geek Out. Can be a bit overwhelming because it's a global group and there's tons of updates, but you can kind of pick and choose what might be relevant from within that. There's loads of great online newsletters, and yeah, as Lizzie was saying, Google Grants for nonprofits is, it's kind of free money, so it's definitely worth looking involved if you can, if you're eligible for that, and finding out more. And there's also a link there to some research on virtual fundraising events. And that's it. So thank you all so much for listening. A bit of a whistle stop tour there. And yeah, we've got 10 minutes if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Lizzie. We have a question in the chat box. What program do you use to add subtitles to your social videos?
So we use Headliner, the one I just mentioned, and that's free for non-profit. So anyone can get a free trial, which I think you can download 8 videos or make 8 videos in a month. But if you're a non-profit, you just have to email them from your work email if you can, and they'll upgrade your account for free, entirely for free, and that's forever. There's no time limit on it, and that's what we use. We don't use anything fancy or expensive, and even I can use it, which is saying something. It's really intuitive. So when you upload your video file, just click video transcript. It will automatically subtitle it for you with all the timestamps in the right place. And then you just need to go through and check it hasn't misheard anything. Especially if someone's maybe got quite like a thick regional accent, it sometimes mishears things. And it might not capitalize like names of products and things like that if it doesn't realize. So you can just quickly adjust it and then download it out from there. So yeah, would really recommend Headliner. There are loads of other alternatives too that different charities use, but that works for me and it's free, so would recommend that one.
Thank you. And someone's asked if you could please show the last slide again about resources. Thank you. Another question from Laura. Do you find there are any issues in accessibility on Instagram for visually impaired people?
So yeah, as I mentioned, stories is an area where it's really frustrating that we're not able to add image descriptions there. So as a workaround there, we would never post like a static that's just, you know, a photograph or a graphic. We would include a voiceover that, you know, reads what's on that or describes it. We primarily use stories for sharing short video clips, so we make sure that they're audio led. In terms of Instagram feed posts, you can add image descriptions to those, so that's really important, and making sure that they're good quality descriptions of what the image is, and yeah, and again for the other formats like Instagram TV and Reels and things, again making sure those videos are audio led. So yeah, they're getting there. The advertising side of things is really frustrating because again there's no alt text option. It will read like a suggested description of what's in an image, but it's not quite right. It's never quite right. So it's better than just put in the caption exactly what's going on.
Okay, another question we have is, do you have any advice for adding alternative text to images on Facebook and Instagram?
So on both Facebook and Instagram, you can add alt text kind of in the back end, but we tend to also include that in our image, in our caption for the photo, just in square brackets at the end. And I think it's just describing anything that's important or useful. So there's text, typing that up, and then just thinking about like, why have we added this image? Like, what is it conveying? If there's something funny about it, like making sure that comes across in the image description. You're not just, you know, saying person in a red shirt. It's like person in a red shirt pulling a very skeptical face at someone else, like conveying the kind of meaning of the photo too. And yeah, there will be some detail that's just not necessary, but you know, anything that you know feels important. If you were to describe that image to someone like verbally, what would you say then? And then just kind of typing that up.
Okay, another question. How can you engage with some channels like Twitter when you have limited staff resources? Have tried a platform for scheduling, but you can't add alternative text.
Yeah, that's something that is really frustrating, that the kind of built-in Twitter scheduling, the free scheduling on Twitter through Media Studio does not allow alt text, only when you're posting live. There are some tools which do allow that, and it's worth maybe trying some different ones. We've used RNIB Hootsuite in the past. There are limits to how many channels you can add to Hootsuite, but if you're just using it for one Twitter feed, then that should be perfectly manageable, and you can add alt text there. And again, like if you're scheduling something that was just text-based or it was an accessible video, then you could use that through the native kind of scheduling, and that would work well. Completely get that, you know, this is my full-time job, and that we're talking to people who've got a million and one different responsibilities. Social media is just a tiny part of that huge to-do list. I do think, you know, when we're talking about the volume that we're putting out at RNIB, it's with that in mind. There's definitely, you know, less you can do to still run a really effective channel and kind of make it work for you. You know, perhaps just checking in once a day. When you post at that point, you check for anything you need to respond to that's come in since the previous time. But yeah, I completely get that it's a competitive space and not everyone has the equal access to resource, to time and to budget and things like that.
Okay. Nina works for a small organisation and is starting their digital media strategy, redesign of website and moving into digital fundraising, but doesn't have a specific person working on this area. I was just wondering how many members of staff are actually involved in social media and web comms at RNIB.
So there are 3 members of staff working on social media at RNIB. One of those is specifically just working on responding to inbound messages that we get. So we get between like 70 and 100 messages a day from supporters, and some of these can be quite complex, as you can imagine. So they have like a customer service role. It's basically, we kind of see it as an extension of our other customer service channels like the phone or email and things like that. And then the other 2, we look after the paid, the advertising side, the organic side, and also outreach that we do with social media influencers. But yes, I can appreciate that that's not everyone is so lucky to have that resource. Then we also have a digital team who look after our website and email and all those kinds of things too.
Yeah, I would. I mean, the digital team is fairly sizable, I think, and there has been kind of more resource put into that recently. And it sounds like, developing a new digital media strategy, redesign of a website, and moving into kind of digital fundraising. That's significant work, and I think it's like, if there's any way that you can find, make the case to dedicate some more resource to that, because I think the opportunities are significant, like, making a business case that the return on actually the improvements that potentially could be made to your website and increased income is probably worthwhile, at least trying to have that conversation. I think as well, just to add to that, is the thing that we mentioned earlier in terms of getting everybody who is already within the organisation upskilled in terms of digital, and utilising all those kind of free resources as well will help with that.
Thank you. And what program do you use to edit videos?
That's Headliner, and that one's free.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have in the chat box, but if anyone would like to unmute themselves, they can ask a question directly.
Don't all rush at once.
Or could just continue using the chat box if you like. Okay, another question on the chat box. Do you also use hashtags in LinkedIn?
Yes, we do use hashtags on LinkedIn, and a great thing about LinkedIn is that they'll suggest recommended hashtags for your post as you're typing it out, which is really handy there. So you can kind of start with what you think would be appropriate, and then it will kind of go, you could add this too, and that can be helpful. And there'll be, some that might be, they'll be different for every post, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just kind of being open to that. There are websites where you can search for kind of recommended hashtags if you put in a theme or idea. Use that for Instagram a lot. And actually, so if you're thinking of challenge events, Lizzie's area, we were going to post on one of those channels as like recruiting participants for an event. I would maybe go to one of those hashtag search tools, type in running, for example, and then kind of copy and paste. It will give you the top like 30 hashtags linked to that. Obviously, just double check them. There's anything dodgy or random in there. There's normally some stuff that's just a bit weird, that it's not bad, but it just doesn't really make sense. Kind of delete that. Make sure you're putting in the capitalized letters for camel case, because it won't be automatically done. And then you can kind of just copy and paste that in. LinkedIn is one that I would recommend managing from your laptop rather than a phone, because of the image descriptions. It won't let you add the alt text into the back end of the photo, so it's just a bit better if you have a work laptop and you can do it from that.
I think we've got time for just one last question then. Have you used stories on LinkedIn yet? If so, did it work well?
We haven't yet. It's on that very long list of new things to try, with fleets coming out yesterday on Twitter. So this kind of move to that short-term, really ephemeral content that disappears after 24 hours is a shift we're seeing, across all social media channels. And it's really interesting to see how people respond to that. So it's on our list of things to try, and I'll let you know how it goes. But just trying to get our LinkedIn into a better shape in general is kind of a priority. I think we need to work on it as a whole, not just trying those out, but we'll see. Look forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine and Lizzie, for your interesting presentation and all the information and ideas you've shared with us. I'm sure everyone will find it really useful.